Millionaire kicks homeless man out of his restaurant. Years later, the man returns, and the millionaire is shocked to see who he has become. The atmosphere in the upscale New York restaurant was thick with tension. Crystal chandeliers hung like glistening stars above, casting an opulent glow over the well-dressed patrons. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, but an undercurrent of unease rippled through the room. At a corner table, Thomas Caldwell, a millionaire with an air of arrogance, surveyed the scene like a king on his throne. He sneered at the couples sharing intimate whispers and the groups enjoying their lavish meals, feeling superior to all those around him. His gaze suddenly caught on a figure entering the restaurant. Eli, a homeless man, stepped through the door, his clothes worn and dirty, his expression lost and vulnerable. The moment he crossed the threshold, the laughter faded into an awkward silence. Thomas's lips curled into a disdainful smile, revealing his true nature. "What a sight," he muttered to his dining companions, his voice dripping with contempt. "Doesn't he know this isn't a place for his kind?" Eli stood at the entrance, visibly uncomfortable, as patrons turned their heads in judgment. Eli's heart sank as he felt the weight of their stares. He wished he could disappear, but he remained rooted to the spot, his eyes wide with confusion. Thomas leaned back in his chair, a smirk plastered on his face. "A little dignity goes a long way," he called out, loud enough for Eli to hear. "Why not try it sometime?" The cutting words struck Eli like a physical blow. He felt the harsh reality of his situation wash over him. He had once been a man of dreams, but now he stood in a world that turned its back on him. The judgment from Thomas and the other diners wrapped around him like chains, binding him to the shame of his homelessness. He wished he could explain the events that led him here, but the words failed him. "Why do they look at me like that?" Eli whispered to himself, the pain of rejection settling deep in his chest. "I'm still a person." But the truth was, on that night, he felt invisible, as if the world had erased him. The restaurant, once a symbol of luxury, now felt like a prison of his own making, with bars made of disdain and indifference. Thomas watched Eli with narrowed eyes, relishing the power he felt. "Look at him," he said, leaning closer to his friends. "He probably thinks he belongs here. Pathetic." Laughter erupted from his table, but it was hollow, echoing through the restaurant like a cruel joke. Eli, hearing the laughter, felt the sting of their mockery. It was as if the laughter was aimed not just at him, but at every homeless person he had ever known. In that moment, Eli turned away, retreating into the cold New York night. He could hear the laughter of the wealthy patrons fading behind him, replaced by the city's harsh reality. The streets felt like a sanctuary, yet they were also a reminder of everything he had lost. "I'm still here," he murmured, pushing through the crowds on the sidewalk. But the words felt empty, echoing in a world that seemed to have forgotten him. As he walked, he thought of the countless times he had faced rejection. Each encounter left a mark, a reminder of the chasm that lay between him and those who dined in luxury. Did they even see him? Did they understand the struggles he faced daily? The questions lingered in his mind, unanswered and heavy. Back inside the restaurant, Thomas took a sip of his expensive wine, a satisfied grin on his face. "Another day, another reminder of how far I've come," he declared, oblivious to the ripple effects of his cruelty. The divide between him and Eli was not just in their circumstances, but in their very humanity. Thomas felt powerful in his world, but he remained blind to the pain he inflicted on others. In the quiet of the night, Eli wandered the streets, searching for a place to rest. He hoped for kindness, however small, to remind him that he was still worthy of being seen. Little did he know that the night's events would set the stage for an encounter that would challenge both men's perspectives on life, wealth, and the true meaning of connection. Eli stood on the corner of 42nd Street, the bright lights of New York City casting long shadows on the pavement. He remembered a time when his life was filled with dreams and hopes. Back then, he wore a crisp white shirt and a tie, working as a graphic designer for a small firm. He could picture himself sitting at his desk, sketching out ideas for vibrant advertisements, feeling proud of the work he created. "One day, I will have my own studio," he often told his friends. But life had a way of changing quickly. As Eli walked down memory lane, he recalled the day he lost his job. The company had downsized, and he was among the first to go. "Sorry, Eli, you've been a great worker, but we have to make cuts," his boss had said, avoiding his gaze. Eli had felt the ground shift beneath him that day. After losing his job, things spiraled. His savings dwindled, and soon he could not pay rent. He moved in with his brother, hoping for a fresh start. "Just until I find a new job," he promised. But his brother's patience wore thin. "You need to get your life together, Eli. I can't keep helping you like this," he said one evening, frustration evident in his voice. The tension grew until one morning Eli found himself out on the street once more, holding a few belongings in a worn-out backpack. As the months passed, Eli felt the weight of despair settle in. Each day was a struggle to survive, and the streets became his new reality. He saw people rushing by, their faces lost in their own worlds. "You don't matter to them," he told himself, trying to block out the pain of rejection. His heart ached as he watched families enjoy meals together in the park, laughter filling the air. He missed those moments that felt so far away. But then, one day, a flyer caught Eli's eye. It was colorful and bright, advertising a local charity organization that offered classes and job training for the homeless. "We can help you find your way back," it promised. Eli's heart raced with hope. Maybe this was the chance he needed. He decided to go. The first day at the charity was a turning point. The room was filled with people like him, lost, but eager to change. "Welcome, everyone," a cheerful woman greeted them. "Today we start a journey together." Eli felt a warmth in his chest. He listened to her talk about skills they could learn and opportunities that awaited them. This was a place of kindness, a stark contrast to the coldness he often felt on the streets. Over the weeks, Eli learned new skills. He practiced sewing and even took a class in computer basics. He met others who shared their stories, their struggles echoing his own. "I used to have a family," one man said, his voice trembling. "But I lost them when I lost my job." Eli nodded, understanding the pain of loss all too well. Outside the charity, Eli would often reflect on his experiences. He saw humanity in the people who stopped to help him. One day, a woman handed him a sandwich, smiling kindly. "I hope you have a good day," she said, her eyes warm. It was small acts like this that reminded him there was still good in the world, even when it seemed dark. "Why do some people care while others ignore?" he pondered aloud one evening as he sat on a park bench. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink as the sun set. "I just want to feel seen again." Eli's journey was not easy, and the memories of his past still haunted him. But with each passing day, he found strength in the kindness of strangers and the support of the charity. "I can get back up," he whispered to himself, determination growing in his heart. He knew it would take time, but for the first time in a long while, there was a flicker of hope. As Eli moved forward, he began to see a path ahead, one that led away from the darkness of the street towards a future filled with possibility. The journey was just beginning, and with it, a chance to reclaim his life and dreams. The grand ballroom of the charity event sparkled with lights. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed guests. Laughter and chatter filled the air, masking the tension that loomed just beneath the surface. Thomas Caldwell, the host, stood at the front, a confident smile plastered across his face. He had made a name for himself in the corporate world, and this event was supposed to be a chance to boost his reputation after recent troubles. But despite the glamour surrounding him, Thomas felt an emptiness inside. The parties, the wealth, and the connections he had built felt superficial. He often found himself in a crowded room, but still felt alone. As he looked at the guests mingling around him, he wondered how many of them were genuine friends and how many were there for what he could offer them. "Another round of champagne, please," he instructed a waiter, trying to ignore the unease creeping into his thoughts. The waiter nodded and hurried away, leaving Thomas to reflect on his choices. Just days ago, he had faced betrayal from someone he trusted, a shocking reminder of how fragile his empire had become. As he stood there, the sound of applause broke through his thoughts. He turned to see a young woman taking the stage, ready to speak about the charity's mission. She shared stories of hope and resilience, and Thomas felt a strange discomfort wash over him. This was supposed to be his event, yet he found himself listening with growing interest. Then, just as he was about to look away, the doors at the back of the room swung open. A figure stepped inside, and all eyes turned toward him. It was Eli, the homeless man Thomas had dismissed so cruelly weeks before. But he was different now. Gone was the lost expression that Thomas had seen. Instead, Eli stood tall, dressed in a well-fitted suit that spoke of dignity and transformation. A hush fell over the room as Eli walked forward. Thomas felt his heart race. The recognition struck him like a bolt of lightning. Their past encounter flooded his mind, and he felt the weight of his earlier arrogance. Eli approached the microphone, and Thomas felt a mix of dread and curiosity. "Good evening, everyone," Eli began, his voice steady and clear. "I am here to share my story, and I hope it resonates with you." He looked out at the crowd, eyes scanning the faces. When they landed on Thomas, a silent acknowledgement passed between them, filled with unspoken words. Eli continued, "I was once like many of you, filled with dreams and hopes for the future. Life took a turn, and I found myself on the streets. But I learned that even in the darkest times, there is a spark of humanity that shines through." His words flowed with emotion, capturing the audience's attention. As Eli spoke, Thomas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had never considered the impact of his actions on someone like Eli. He heard Eli recount moments of kindness he had experienced while homeless, contrasting sharply with the indifference he had faced from people like Thomas. The guilt settled heavily on Thomas's shoulders, forcing him to confront his past. "Every person has a story," Eli said, looking directly at Thomas again. "And wealth or status does not define a person's value. True success is measured by how we treat each other." The room remained silent, captivated by Eli's honesty. Thomas's mind raced. Could he truly change? Was it possible that his life of luxury was a facade hiding deeper issues? As Eli's speech continued, Thomas felt a growing desire to understand more, to connect with the man he once looked down upon. After Eli finished speaking, the applause erupted in the room. Thomas stood still, lost in thought. He realized this was a turning point, not just for Eli, but for him as well. They were both at a crossroads, and their paths had crossed once more in a way neither had expected. "Eli," Thomas finally spoke, stepping forward as the applause faded. "I need to talk to you. There's so much I want to understand." Eli nodded, his expression calm yet curious. This moment could change everything for both of them, and Thomas knew he had to confront the man he once was. As they exchanged words, the noise of the event faded away. In that crowded room, amidst the glitter and glamour, a genuine connection began to emerge, rooted in shared experiences and the hope for a better future. The atmosphere in the grand banquet hall buzzed with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed guests who mingled, laughing and clinking glasses filled with expensive wine. At the center of it all stood Thomas Caldwell, the millionaire, his sharp suit highlighting his presence. He scanned the room, a smirk playing on his lips as he enjoyed the view from his perch of wealth and privilege. But then, a figure entered the hall, breaking the polished facade like a stone thrown into a still pond. Eli stepped forward, his once tattered clothes replaced by a simple, yet dignified outfit. He looked around, his heart pounding as he recognized the faces of those who once ignored him. And then, their eyes met. Thomas and Eli, two worlds colliding in a single moment. Thomas felt a jolt of recognition, his heart skipping a beat as memories surged through him. "What are you doing here?" he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, filled with disbelief and a hint of disdain. Eli held Thomas's gaze, a mix of emotions swirling within him. "I'm here to share my story," he replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of feelings inside. "I have something to say." The audience quieted, intrigued by the unexpected presence on stage. Thomas watched, a knot forming in his stomach. He had dismissed Eli so easily before, yet here he was, standing tall with a purpose. Eli took a deep breath, his heart racing, and began to speak. "Many of you may not understand what it's like to lose everything," Eli began, his voice resonating in the room. "I was once like you, filled with dreams. But life has a way of turning those dreams into dust. I lost my job, my family, and then I lost myself." As Eli shared his story of pain and resilience, Thomas felt something shift within him. The words cut deep, each sentence a reminder of the arrogance he once wore like a shield. Eli continued, "But I found hope. I found people who cared, who showed me that even in my darkest times, I was still worthy of kindness." The audience listened, their eyes glued to Eli as he spoke of his experiences on the streets, the nights spent in fear and cold, but also the moments of unexpected kindness that kept him going. Thomas felt a wave of guilt wash over him, gripping his heart like a vice. He had once scoffed at those who struggled, but now he began to see their humanity. Eli paused, his gaze moving across the room, landing on Thomas once more. "We are not defined by our circumstances. Wealth does not equal success. It is how we treat others that truly matters." Thomas shifted uncomfortably, his mind racing. He had spent years building an empire, yet in that moment, all he could think about was the emptiness behind his achievements. Eli's words echoed in his mind, challenging everything he believed. As Eli finished, the audience erupted in applause, but Thomas remained silent, lost in thought. He felt a tug at his conscience, an urge to confront Eli. After the crowd began to disperse, Thomas approached him, his heart pounding. "Eli," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't understand before. I thought I was better than you, but now I see how wrong I was." Eli looked at Thomas, his expression a mix of surprise and caution. "It takes a lot to admit that," he replied, his voice calm. "But understanding is just the first step. What will you do with that knowledge?" "I don't know," Thomas admitted, his confidence wavering. "But I want to learn. I want to change." Eli nodded slowly, seeing a flicker of sincerity in Thomas's eyes. "Change is possible, but it requires action. You have the power to make a difference, not just for yourself, but for others." The two men stood there, the weight of their pasts hanging in the air, yet a new understanding began to form between them. In that moment of vulnerability, both realized that the true measure of a man lay not in his wealth, but in his compassion and willingness to grow. As the evening came to an end, Thomas felt a shift within him. He was no longer just a wealthy businessman. He was a man on the brink of transformation, inspired by the resilience of someone he once dismissed. Eli, too, felt a spark of hope, knowing that perhaps, just perhaps, they could find common ground and forge a new path forward, together. The air was still charged with the energy of the charity event, but the bright lights had dimmed, leaving behind a quiet space for reflection. Thomas Caldwell sat in his luxurious apartment, looking out over the sprawling city of New York. The clinking of glasses and the chatter of guests had faded, replaced by the heavy silence of his thoughts. He turned away from the window, the glow of the skyline no longer filling him with excitement. Instead, a sense of unease lingered within him. Eli Green had left a mark on Thomas that night. Their eyes had met, and in that moment, Thomas felt a wave of emotions he had buried deep for years. Now, he couldn't shake the feeling that something in him had shifted. The memory of Eli's story echoed in his mind, the pain and the strength in his voice resonating with every beat of his heart. "Why did I never see it?" Thomas muttered to himself, his brow furrowed in thought. The question hung in the air, demanding an answer he was not ready to give. Over the next few days, Thomas found himself reaching for his phone more often than usual. He hesitated, his finger hovering over Eli's number, but he never pressed send. Instead, he spent hours thinking about the man who had once been invisible to him, a shadow in the streets. The more he reflected, the more he realized how far removed he had been from the reality of others' lives. Finally, he could hold back no longer. He picked up the phone and dialed Eli's number. The sound of ringing filled the room, and with each tone, Thomas felt a mix of anxiety and hope. "Hello?" Eli's voice was warm, yet cautious. "Eli, it's Thomas," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Thomas? From the charity event?" Eli sounded surprised. "Yes, I wanted to see if we could meet. I've been thinking a lot about what you shared," Thomas confessed, his heart racing. "Sure, I'd like that," Eli replied, his tone softening. "Where do you want to meet?" They decided to meet at a small cafe not far from Eli's temporary housing. As Thomas walked into the cafe, he spotted Eli sitting at a table with a coffee in front of him. Eli looked different than the first time Thomas had seen him. There was a dignity in his posture, a quiet strength in his eyes. "Hey, thanks for coming," Eli said, a small smile breaking across his face. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," Thomas replied, taking a seat across from him. "I've been thinking about what you said during your speech." Eli nodded, his expression turning serious. "It's not easy for people like us to be heard. Many don't want to listen." "I never listened," Thomas admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been so caught up in my own world that I ignored the struggles of others. I want to change that." Eli leaned forward, curiosity lighting up his face. "What do you mean?" "I want to help. I want to support the charity that helped you," Thomas said, his heart pounding. "I have resources that can make a difference." Eli's eyes widened in surprise. "You really mean that?" "Yes," Thomas affirmed, a sense of purpose swelling inside him. "I want to use my wealth to create opportunities for people who need it. I've learned that true success isn't just about money and power." Eli smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "That would mean a lot to those who are struggling, but it's not just about money. It's about understanding and connection." Thomas nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. "You're right. I want to learn more. I want to understand your world better. I can introduce you to the charities team," Eli offered. "They do amazing work. You'll see how much they help people like me." "Let's do it," Thomas said, determination in his voice. "I want to change my life and help others in the process." As they spoke, an unexpected friendship began to blossom. Thomas felt a warmth spreading through him, a feeling he had not experienced in a long time. It was as if a bridge was forming between their different worlds, and he was ready to step across it. With each shared story, their bond grew stronger, and for the first time, Thomas felt connected to something greater than himself. In that small cafe, amidst the clatter of cups and the chatter of patrons, two men from vastly different backgrounds began to forge a path toward understanding, friendship, and hope. As the sun began to rise over New York City, Eli and Thomas stood side by side on a rooftop, overlooking the bustling streets below. The city was waking up, and with it, a sense of hope filled the air. Both men had traveled a long way from their previous lives, and now they were ready to make a difference together. "Look at them," Eli said, pointing at the busy pedestrians. "So many stories, so many struggles. I want to help them." His voice was steady, filled with determination. Thomas nodded, feeling a sense of pride in Eli. "You have already started, Eli. Your voice matters. You've experienced what they go through, and that gives you power." Eli smiled, warmth spreading through his chest. He had found purpose in advocating for the homeless community. His own journey from despair to hope had fueled his passion to help others. I just want them to know they're not alone. Together, they had begun working with the charity that had once helped Eli. They organized events to raise awareness about homelessness, inviting people from all backgrounds to join in the fight for change. Thomas used his connections in the corporate world to gather support and resources. One evening, as they prepared for an upcoming fundraiser, Eli turned to Thomas. "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been if we hadn't met?" Thomas paused, reflecting on the question. "I do. It's strange to think that a chance encounter could change everything. You opened my eyes to what really matters." Eli chuckled softly. "And you taught me that even the richest people can care. You're not just a millionaire, Thomas. You're a friend." Their friendship had grown stronger. They found joy in each other's company, sharing stories and laughter as they worked towards a common goal. Eli cherished the moments when they would simply sit in a coffee shop, discussing their dreams for the future. "Imagine if we could create a shelter that feels like home," Eli said one day, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "A place where people can feel safe and loved." "That's a brilliant idea," Thomas responded, leaning forward. "We could include job training, counseling, and everything that can help them get back on their feet." Eli nodded enthusiastically. "We can't just provide shelter. We need to give them hope and a chance to rebuild their lives." As they planned their shelter, Thomas reached out to his corporate contacts for funding. He was determined to use his wealth for good to create a positive impact in the world. In the boardroom, he spoke passionately about the project. "Together, we can make a real difference," he told his colleagues. "This isn't just charity, it's an investment in our community." Eli watched from the sidelines as Thomas spoke. He felt a swell of gratitude. The man who had once looked down on him now stood up for the very people he had dismissed. As time went on, their joint efforts began to take shape. They held community meetings, inviting input from those who had experienced homelessness. Eli shared his story, and Thomas listened, taking notes on how to make their shelter a welcoming place. One evening, after a long day of planning, Eli and Thomas sat on a bench in a nearby park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. "I never thought I would feel this way again," Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I have purpose, like I matter." Thomas placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. "You matter, Eli. You've shown me what true strength looks like. You inspire me every day." Eli looked out at the horizon, a sense of peace washing over him. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" "Absolutely," Thomas replied, a smile spreading across his face. "And we're just getting started." As they sat together, both men understood the profound impact they had on each other's lives. They had forged a bond built on empathy, understanding, and a shared desire for change. In that moment, they celebrated the possibility of redemption and the strength found in human connection. The journey ahead was still long, but together, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Share this story if you believe that friendship and compassion can transform lives and create hope in the darkest times. Leave a comment about a moment when a connection changed your path, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.